Morning from the minivan. my camera's a little but it'll be okay for this short video. Had a topic in mind for you guys, a conversation to have with you that is so important, and it's about the concept and practice of accountability. So let's set the table this way. I think there's three things that you really need to get right as a leader in whatever facet of life that you're working in. Being a leader in your family, being a leader at work, being a leader, of course, in your business and with your teams, leader in your community, leader in your church or congregation. I think there's three things with accountability that are central to really effective leadership. Number one is that you obviously have to hold yourself accountable. Number two, you have to hold those that are around you accountable as appropriate. We'll talk about that in a minute. That's especially relevant for those of you that are building teams. And number three, you must be receptive when those that are leading you call you out on not doing what you're supposed to do. And when they are reminding you and holding you accountable, you need to be receptive to that. Okay, so those are the three things. So in way of illustrating this, I do a lot of coursework for mindset, personal development, and kind of spiritual practice in my life. And I work with a course director, someone who is working with me as I navigate the course from a distance. My course director is actually in California, so in this particular thing that I work on. And what happens is for each volume of the work, I'm completing a certain number of assignments every week, and I turn those in. They get graded, sent back for feedback. All this happens generally via email. But what happens if you don't keep up, and if you're not consistently turning in your assignments, they call you on it, right? They hold me accountable. So, and they don't just hold you accountable via, a little message, the email that says, hey, where's your next assignment? She certainly does that. The course director that I'm working with is brilliant, but she says that to me. She'll send me an email, certainly. She'll send me a text, but they go so far as they send me this little notice in the mail. It's like a little postcard, and it's got this like bright orange and red writing on it. And it says, hey, it looks like you have not turned in an assignment recently for, whatever the course is that I'm going through. Please get that turned in so that you can successfully complete this and, kind of move on to the next step. Sincerely, course director. I remember the first time, this was months ago, the first time I got one of those. I was at a crazy busy time. We had just done a top shelf launch, I think, and there was so much going on, and I had fallen behind. I'd gone like a week and a half, 2 weeks without completing an assignment. And when I first got that note, like most of us, we like to talk about accountability and say, oh, that's very important, but until somebody calls us on it. Then when we get called on it, we tend to get a little pissy, right? One of my mentors, a guy named Tony Rush, is fond of saying, people love to talk about how important straight talk is until the straight talk is directed to them. Then all of a sudden they don't like it. Have you noticed that? I've been unfriended and blocked more in 2017 just on Facebook alone, simply because I speak straight about issues in business. I don't fluff it up, and I won't tell people exactly what they want to hear. I tell them the truth. Most people don't like that. Anyway, so with that in mind, when I got that notice that first time, I had that knee-jerk kind of pissy reaction, right? I'm like, well, how dare you? I have all this stuff going on, and and we come up with our litany of excuses. We've all got great excuses. But when I really got to thinking about it, and I stopped having an emotional response, but I really looked at it practically, what they were doing in sending, what my course director was doing in sending that little postcard to me, was saying this: you said that you were going to complete this. You said this was important to you. You said you made an agreement that this really mattered to you. And so I'm reminding you of that and helping you get back on track. And then when I saw that, I was like, you know what? Boom. And I got back in and got up to speed and have never fallen behind since in my coursework. But the point is that's what accountability is. So now, I said the first lesson is to hold yourself accountable. I set up a schedule for that particular thing that I work on, and I said, okay, I am going to make sure that every morning between, essentially I do it every morning between 5:15 and 6 o'clock. I'm doing my reading and completing my assignments for my coursework before anything else gets done, because it's super important to me. And I've made that commitment, and I'm going to finish it, and I'm going to follow it through. So I hold myself accountable. But then the second part of this is, especially for those of you in teams, it's so important for you to hold those around you accountable. For those of you in Instagram Mastery Automation, we have a private Facebook group for that. And yesterday I'd posted some support stuff, some training and some access for people to just get some free coaching, basically, on some elements inside of their funnels. And only a handful of people responded, and the rest of the people were just kind of sitting around. And, I'm not making a judgment on sitting around, good, bad, or indifferent, but I did remind them that, hey, this is like the MLM averages, right? 95% of the group sitting, about 5%, 3 to 5% actually working. Don't be part of the average. Come on, you bought this course, engage, step it up, let's go. Holding them accountable. It'd be very easy for me to say, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it, get around to it when you want to, but that's not me being the right leader for them. And when when I posted that, somebody already left the group. I told you, it's a great way to get unfriended and blocked, and people say stuff about you and all that as soon as you start laying down and holding people accountable. But it's the best thing you can do for your teams. So if you have someone that joins your team and says, I want to do this for my family, I want to do this for my kids, I want to stay at home, and I want to have to, put them in daycare and all those kinds of things. If they say that, and then they're not doing anything, you have to hold them accountable. Don't babysit them, but hold them accountable. Be willing to call them up. Hey, so-and-so, listen, wanted to find out what you were doing because it looks like you're not doing a lot. My understanding is that we agreed that you were pushing and fighting for your family so they wouldn't have to go to daycare, that the kids wouldn't have to go, that you'd have more time with them, you guys wouldn't be drowning under debt. I mean, that's what we discussed, right? So I'm here to remind you that we made that agreement and reminding you that you need to get engaged. Hold them accountable. A big problem, I think, for a lot of us is we think that somehow by babying people or telling them what they want to hear or not talking about the elephants in the room, that somehow we're helping them. We're not. I can tell you over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that I've personally enrolled in various and sundry businesses over the last 4 years and products. I can tell you it does absolutely nothing for overall retention to baby, stroke, handle with kid gloves people. It doesn't. It does not keep them around any longer. Don't fall victim to that, because I did for years. I thought, well, what they need is for me to be, more understanding and more soft in my messaging and more, gentle and all this other stuff. That'll keep them around longer, and it doesn't. It doesn't keep them around any longer at all. As a matter of fact, even if they stay around, they're not empowered as business owners to do what they need to do because you're doing it for them. Okay? They don't have any internal motivation. It's all external. So don't be afraid to hold your team, hold your space accountable. So hold yourself first, of course. Hold those around you. And the final thing, again, is make sure you're receptive. Don't be the person that flies off and says, I can't believe Gary said that, or I can't believe, your upline leader gets on a conference call for your team and starts throwing down and saying, hey, you know what? There's a bunch of you that are not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Don't hang up the phone and be like, that jerk, they don't know what they're talking about. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go find me another deal where somebody will stroke me and love me and tell me sweet things. I'm switching companies, or whatever the case may be. Tell you a funny story. My first mentor in online business, still a good friend of mine online. We talk frequently, and we were actually partnering on a project here. In about the next 3 months, we're going to finally get to work together again. In the very beginning, about a year into my journey, he was really, really holding me accountable. And it was uncomfortable because I hadn't grown all the way up yet. We're all growing up in business, right? But I wasn't there yet. I was still very fragile, right? You say something to me and I'm going to get all knocked out the box. And wouldn't you know it, I was talking about unfriending and blocking. I've had a lot of people do that to Crystal and I this year. And it's all been around, I didn't like the way You said that. I didn't like the way I don't like the way you talk to people. I think you're being rude or too rough or too blunt or whatever. And he was being very raw with me. As a matter of fact, so much so that I met him at an event. We were at an event and we had lunch. It was a quick lunch in between a break, and he really kind of got in on me because I was one of his bigger producers, but I still was not getting it. I was getting in my own way, basically, you know, and he was trying to get me out of my own way. I got so offended that I ended up doing exactly what people do to Crystal and I all the time now. I unfriended him on Facebook. How juvenile, right? I unfriended him. I unfriended his wife, who was, you know, corresponded with Crystal and I. We left all the groups. Does this sound familiar? I mean, we see this all the time now, and I'm like, why would anybody do that? Well, I remember when I did it. I was about a year into my business and I did it. And it was a knee-jerk, emotional, it was the adult version of when my 2-year-old has a tantrum. That's exactly what I did at about a year into my business, because someone was holding me accountable. And this someone was getting better results than me and was living the life that I wanted, but my ego was so big that it wouldn't allow for that. And so I decided to write checks with my ego there and leave and unfriend and block and do all that stuff. Very, very silly. I heard someone say, and I think it's Wayne Dyer, that said ego stands for edging God out. I loved that. Whatever your version of God is, I think that's an interesting quote, but another conversation. But ego will keep you from receiving that accountability check from your mentors. Don't let that happen. Ego is a nasty, nasty thing. Confidence, great. Ego, bad. You know, because there's that fine line. And since then, obviously my mentor and I are back to being friends on Facebook. We did that many years ago, and we're getting ready to work together again. And because he was very patient with me, when I came back and I was like, can I be your friend again and all this? Of course, he didn't hold it against me. Just like we've had people that have, you know, we've said something in a training and somebody get all upset and they unfriend us, and like 6 months, a year later, they like add us back and they want to get back in the groups, and they're like, is that okay? We're like, of course, because we've been there and we grew through that too. And everybody's got to grow at the different pace, but don't let your ego get in the way of when people correct you and are just not just correction, just holding you accountable. I think of holding accountable as simply someone saying, hey, listen, you need to do what you said you were going to do. And I've had that happen, you know, a few times in my business. And again, like I was telling you in my coursework, and I receive it and I appreciate it, because if I'm honest, I'm like, yep, they've got a point. You know, I need to get my act together. And I respect so much people who have the courage. You know, my mentors and your mentors respect and have the courage to tell you, hey, you know what? You said you were going to do something. You need to go do it. Don't let the ego and get all hurt about it. Go, wait a minute. This person is like telling me that I need to finish what I start. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. It would be much more hurtful to you if someone said, oh, take your time. You don't really need to finish your commitments. No, you don't need to do what you said you were going to do. No, it's no big deal. You do what you need to do. It's fine. That's much more hurtful to you than that few minutes of feeling a little punched in the gut when someone says, hey, you know what? Like when I got my little postcard that said, hey, you know, you've fallen behind. You need to get yourself in gear. You said you were doing this. Let's do it. Hope that helps. Be accountable to yourself. Hold yourself accountable. Hold those around in your sphere of influence accountable. And make sure you're receptive to when your leaders and mentors hold you accountable, because all they're doing is saying, hey, you made an agreement. I want you to finish what you started so you can do something great. Have a great day, everybody.